Well, welcome in, everybody. It's the weekly Friday chat with Jeff Duncan. It's the Dattitude Podcast here on all of our NOLA.com stations. We are just excited to be here. We have so much to talk about this morning. I think you all know what we're probably going to talk about most, but we'll sprinkle in the Super Bowl, some Super Bowl chat and some Pelicans later on in the show. Jeff Duncan, how are you this morning?
Doing good, JD. Still waiting on that king cake that I owe you. I gotta pay you off on that, so we got to figure out a plan.
Oh yeah, we're gonna definitely. I think I'll make the announcement next Friday on our last live show of this calendar year. We'll figure out what we're gonna do, but we'll have to get together too. Maybe we can mix in an adult beverage or something with that king cake.
Oh yeah, maybe we do our Dattitude with the king cake together or something like that.
That would be interesting. Maybe we can have a few adult beverages before we do the podcast. Then we can have a lot of fun doing it.
I don't know, man. Does adult beverage go with king cake? That seems a little like a bad combination. Maybe not. I don't know.
You've lived in New Orleans for over 2 decades now. Adult beverages go with everything, don't they?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I mean, you can celebrate. It's only a couple months till the Kentucky Derby's coming up. I know you're excited about that, and spring it'll be warm. I see you wearing a t-shirt. What, you got the heat cranked up at the Duncan abode?
Yeah, man. I just was outside out front doing a little yard work. Yeah, I'm in good shape.
You were outside with short sleeves on.
Yeah, it was fine.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a little different here on the North Shore. It was like 44 degrees this morning. That's a little too chilly for me. But
I mean, look, it wasn't. I wasn't going to take my shirt off, but it was definitely.
Well, please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't. All right. Well, this morning we are welcoming, as we do every Friday, welcoming your comments / questions. And really this morning, I'm interested to get, we're going to show some results from a poll question that we put up. We're doing a new feature on our Bayou Bet Show on Thursdays where we put out a poll question. We get your responses and we post the results on Thursday's show. But I'm also going to post them here because I find it very interesting. It's not what I expected at all because it's definitely not what I think. I'm certainly interested to hear your feedback from the events of the week. But first off, obviously the Saints trading Sean Payton to Denver for getting a first-round pick this year, sort of. It's the 29th pick of the draft. And then next year getting Denver's second-round pick, and the Saints have to give up a third in return. Before we get to what you think of the deal, I thought it was outstanding that you were able to talk to Coach Payton about an hour or so after the deal was announced, and he had a good bit to say. What was your feeling about what his excitedness and the level that he's glad it's probably all over now?
Yeah, look, he was fired up. I mean, he called me actually. I just sent him a text, and he called me, which I was surprised to get because I was in the middle of writing. And I could tell immediately how excited he was. And, I think he wanted to kind of get his side out. There have been a lot of bad reporting in the interim.
Yep.
And he had to kind of, obviously you're going through a coaching search and a lot of high-level meetings. You're not going to air that publicly. So I think he wanted to kind of set the record straight on the coaching search process with Denver, how much he liked it, how much he respects how they handled it. And also I think at the same time, let everybody know that he really respected Mickey Loomis, the way he handled the process. And look, he's going to miss New Orleans. There's no doubt about it. But Denver is a great, I think, place for him to start his second phase of his coaching career. They're deep-pocketed owners there. They want to win. He's following, he comes in there where they're really in need of a proven leader like him to kind of turn the program around. So there's a lot of good things for him there. And he was excited to get going. I mean, he had the press conference is going to be Monday, and I think he was ready that day to start get started work.
We are taking your comments and questions all morning. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you just type them in the comment section, and we'll be glad to put them up, as Jerry does here. And Jerry, I'm so glad to see that you actually typed your name in. You're Jerry now. So, I mean, we all knew who you were, but he says, what a roller coaster ride this week with the Saints and Pelicans for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pelicans towards the end of the show and their 10-game losing streak as they make a furious comeback last night in Dallas, but can't get it done. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, I'm interested to. We have not spoken since last Friday. I mean, we've texted, but not about this. So I'm very interested to get the way you feel about this trade, and if you think it's a good deal for the Saints, because frankly, I mean, I've made it pretty clear over the shows that I've been on, and just the insinuations I've made with some of the posts that I've had, that I just don't. I think the Saints didn't get enough in this deal. I'll say why in a minute, but I have no idea what you're going to say.
Well, I mean, I think, I know where you're coming from on that. I just think, you can only get what the market bears. I know, the thought would be, well, just don't accept it, but I don't know how realistic that is. If they held off, to me, it came down to Denver for Sean Payton, or he was going to return to the TV studio with Fox. He wasn't going to go to Arizona, wasn't in the picture at Carolina. So really it was one team. So Mickey Loomis did not have a ton of bargaining power there. There was only one team really in the mix. He knew that. And I think, Sean told me he talked to Mickey, I think it was on Monday night. I think that deal got announced on Tuesday. He talked to Mickey. I guarantee you they basically talked about, let's just get this thing done. They've been together a long time in their careers. And I think, it could have gotten ugly. It could have gotten contentious. Both sides could have dug in. If Mickey would have done what you're saying, tried to drive a harder bargain, this thing could have ended up in court, Jim. I mean, it could have ended up where Sean said, well, I'm going to walk in that door and start coaching. What are you going to do? Like, arrest me? It could have it wasn't going to get that far, but it could have gotten to that, arbitration or a lawsuit. So neither side wanted that. So I think both sides wanted to kind of, once it was established Sean Payton won this job, I think Mickey Loomis wanted to get the best deal he could. And I think getting a first rounder and a second rounder next year, which could be early second rounder if the Broncos aren't any good, it's about as good as I think he was going to get. And the other thing I'd say real quick is that you also have to understand the two general managers involved in this, George Payton and Mickey Loomis, both of them coming off disappointing seasons at their respective jobs, right? Both of them need they need some wins, if you know what I mean. Mickey Loomis needs to get some draft picks and get some hope for the fan base. George Payton needs hope for the Broncos after he hired Nathaniel Hackett and it was an utter flop. So both of them were motivated to get a deal done to kind of start turning the tide on their respective legacies.
Well, here's how I usually judge things like this. When a trade's made, I try to look at both fan bases and see how they respond. The Saints fans are just kind of lukewarm. I would say overall they approve, but it's kind of a lukewarm approval. The Denver fans are jumping off. They want to go party in Mile High right now. I mean, they're like off the rails, thrilled with this deal. So to me, that says kind of a lot, kind of a good bit right there. And look, I hear what you're saying. The Saints didn't want to go far, but I also take something you said. To me, it's almost Mickey Loomis doing Sean Payton a solid and saying, you know what, you want to go, we'll just get this over with, and it's fair enough. Let's get this circus out of here. And at the same time, the Saints held all the cards. I don't care. It's not going to court. It's not going to litigation. Sean Payton's not going to. And I get what you're saying. What he could have done, but to me,
all right. What happens if Mickey Loomis says no? I mean, what happens? I mean,
he goes back to Fox.
Well, I know, and then you think the fans are going to be happy about that? They don't get anything, and then
I think the fans were already resigned to the fact that he wasn't going to go anywhere. I mean, we talked about it last week.
I know. I'm just saying,
even the fans that were super gung ho, let's get a first round pick, they were already resigned to the fact that it wasn't going to happen, and I think most of them had already said, okay, it's not going to happen. We'll talk about it again next year. I mean, I think
different. That's different than if there's a negotiation going on and there's a chance you can get something. It's different if Sean says, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going back to Fox, and you had no chance to get anything. But if somebody fans find out, wait a second, we had a chance to get a first and a second, and we let them walk, and now next year it might not be nearly that much. I mean, that's the risk that Mickey Loomis had to consider.
Well, you talk about Mickey Loomis being this poker player, and by all accounts is a great one. You'd think he'd want to gamble a little bit. I mean, to me, you're gambling on a. I mean, let's say it would be like sort of like the Saints playing Philadelphia. I mean, and you're betting on Philadelphia. I mean, the odds are in your favor. I'm just saying the odds were in the Saints' favor to hold out and wait and get a better deal next year, in my opinion. Because to me, what we've talked about how the only good thing is this team is super cap strapped. So it helps them in the fact that to get another pick, you get a solid player in there that's probably whoever it is going to probably start next year. So that helps you in that facet that you don't have to go out in free agency and get whatever player that was. But at the same time, they're not going to be in that much better shape next year. I think, I'm just I'm trying to be realistic. And I think the Saints are going to be in a position to where they're going to have to make even the changes they got to make this year. They're going to have to even make even more after the 2023 season, in my opinion. And so I think to try to get a better deal for next year, I think would help them better in the long run. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think Mickey Loomis was thinking, let's start this rebuilding phase, if that's what you want to call it, right away. And I think the other thing that you're not considering that I think was a heavy factor here was they didn't want the specter of Sean Payton hanging over this.
That I can understand.
For another year, and especially for Dennis Allen. I mean, I think Mickey Loomis wants desperately, for a lot of reasons, Dennis Allen to take this ship and get it righted, and he desperately wants him to win. I mean, Mickey Loomis hired him, and this is Mickey Loomis's chance to kind of establish his own legacy without Drew Brees and Sean Payton. So he's invested in Dennis Allen being successful, and I think having all the fans out there thinking, boy, could Sean Payton come back again next year? That's the last thing they wanted.
Well, I understand that part of it. Now I do, but I think you're, like I've said, we both said, really, it's really the only chip that the Saints have held throughout this whole process. Now they hold no chips, in my opinion. I want to get to the fan. We talked about this poll, and I didn't put this together in our own graphics, so I just took the graphics from the poll the poll source that we used. And the question that I put out this week was, did the Saints receive enough compensation for Sean Payton? The options of choice were, number one was without a doubt, any first rounder is better than none. That would have been like gung-ho happy. The next one was, I guess so, but sure seems like they could have gotten more. The third choice would have been, no, but I don't hate it. And the one that I would have chosen had I involved myself in the poll was, has Mickey Loomis lost his damn mind? This team is doomed. Now, I don't think that this team is doomed per se, but the responses I found were interesting. So the top two responses were the positive responses. If you look at the percentages, it's about 59% are say that the Saints did the right thing. And so that leaves about 31% or so that said that they did not do the right thing. I got to say, I was surprised by this response. I thought it would be about 50-50 and maybe geared a little bit towards no. So fans in the grand scheme of things seem to be satisfied, not thrilled with the results.
Yeah, I think part of that was Loomis somewhat establishing expectations early on. I mean, he told me he was going to start off asking for 2 firsts, but I think he knew that was the starting point and that he'd end up getting, what he wanted, which was a first and something else. And I think he got that. He got pretty much what he wanted, maybe a little more, to be honest with you. I think he got a good deal considering the climate. But in your point of view, I get it. I mean, somebody said something to me in this process that I think makes a lot of sense. If you're a Broncos fan, why you should be happy. Basically, Denver, if you consider the swap of the second rounder for the third rounder is like maybe an even swap, or maybe a little.
Why do you even do it?
Yeah, if you consider that just kind of an even swap, basically Denver got Sean Payton for Bradley Chubb, and you do that deal in a heartbeat all day, every day. You get a coach, a Hall of Fame coach that's going to be with you presumably for the next decade or so, and can change the culture and lead to, division championships or contention and all that. For a pass rusher, you do it in a heartbeat. So I understand your point, but I think the market really wasn't there for Sean Payton. I think there would have been a better market next year, but then you've got a full 100%. year, a full year to wait. So
the market would have absolutely been better next year with teams that have better quarterbacks that would have been probably better suited for Payton. And I got to be honest, I'm surprised he wanted to go there in the first place. Now, money talks. I understand that, but I don't know what he saw from Russell Wilson or that team that makes him think that he can win, especially in that division, which could be one of the toughest, if not the toughest in football. And I don't get it. You get to play Mahomes twice a year. I think the Raiders will be a little bit better. The Chargers are certainly, their coaching situation is awful. So, but I think they're a good football team. Could be great if they had a good coach. Here's a comment, I guess. The 29th pick at quarterback will not start. Who's to say they're going to draft a quarterback? I don't necessarily think you got the 20. I think they will draft a quarterback in this draft, but that doesn't mean with the 29th pick of the draft they're going to take a quarterback. Will not start, and you don't know that's true either. The 29th picks have started before at quarterback. They should have sat on Sean Payton for one more year. Obviously, I agree. There's no Gruden deal. That was 20 years ago. That wasn't going to happen. So let's get past that. I agree with "Oh baby, I'm almost ready" to some extent. I agree that they should have waited one more year, but I don't agree with the Saints. Definitely can get a pick that could come in and start right away. And again, it's not necessarily going to be a quarterback. I think they'll draft a quarterback that goes. Hold on, there was another comment in here that I forgot to post up. That I had a good question from Royce. If we can acquire David Carr, would Hendon Hooker still be in play in the draft? Hendon Hooker is not going to be going before the 29th pick of the draft. So if that's what you're looking for, I think Hendon Hooker will still be available. There are going to be plenty of quarterbacks to be had this year.
Yeah, it's good. It's going to be a good year for quarterbacks. I'll be surprised if they're in the Derek Carr hunt. Derek Carr is going to command.
Not going to be able to afford him.
Yeah, it's too much money. They could make it work, but they have to gut the rest of the roster. Makes no sense to me right now where they're at in this stage of their roster building. But, here's the other thing you have to think about. When you wait a year, and I know this is a little esoteric, but when you wait a year, when you draft somebody at 29 like they will this year, there's going to be a player on your roster helping you win this year that you don't have. So there's a value to that. There's a value, and it's no different than having money in your hands or waiting a year to get money in your hands. There's value to you having it and being able to invest it or do with it what you want. That's why it's always better to have the thing in hand early, because then you have that asset. So the Saints, by getting that player now, can invest in their roster this year as opposed to waiting another year without it. So it's just a roster building general manager type of thought process.
Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan here on the Dattitude Podcast. We're live every Friday. Well, I'll say that. We're almost to the end of our season. We're going to take a brief hiatus after next Friday. Also, a programming note, there will be no Dattitude on Monday. I'm going to take Monday, the pod portion off as I dive deep into analysis. I'm going to spend a lot of next week going through every little thing you can possibly go through and trying to make my final Super Bowl prediction and some props, and we're going to have all kinds of things on bet.nola.com next week, and it's going to take – I've already kind of started, excuse me, but we're going to have a full week of all those sorts of things. So no pod on Monday, and next Friday will be the final live Dattitude for Duncan and I until probably around the draft. We'll probably get together around the draft and do some things then, and then obviously – few here and there during the summer and before we get back to the football season back next August probably. But look, we could talk about this for a long time. I know there's other things that we want to talk about, and we don't want to be on the air for an hour and a half today. I hear what you're saying, and I get the point that you want to make this Dennis Allen's team, but the things that you're talking about all lead to sort of a rebuilding kind of thing, and I thought that's not where the Saints want to be. You're talking about – I know you got to go through this cap process, and you talk about all the time about not being able to kick the can down the road any longer. But all these things we're talking about to me leads to a rebuild. If that's where the Saints want to go, great. But let's don't make it sound different than it is.
Well, I mean, I don't know how not taking a draft pick this year and waiting till next year. To me, that's even more of a rebuild. You're waiting down the road for it. But here's the thing: I don't think they're looking at this just knowing how Mickey Loomis thinks and probably how Dennis Allen thinks. I think they're still looking at this team, especially with the way the NFC South is, and no more Tom Brady in Tampa. That thing's wide open. So they probably look at their roster and feel pretty good about being able to compete once they get through this transition of what they're going to do in free agency and who they're going to cut, who's going to be the cap casualties. They obviously have to address the quarterback position. But I think they would look at it and say, man, if we can get an upgraded quarterback in it, I don't think it has to be huge, but a Jimmy Garoppolo type, somebody like that, that's an upgrade over what you had. I think they feel like, hey, we could easily win this division next year and get in the playoffs while we're transitioning to the future and kind of getting our roster back in order.
I know you're not going to say anything bad about what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. What scares the hell out of me is that we're going to go through another season of Andy Dalton. And if you do, again, I'll say the same thing I said 15 weeks ago. You're staring 6-11 in the face, then we're sitting here next year and saying they should have just started the rebuild process because now you delayed it a year. That's what scares the hell out of me. If they get Jimmy Garoppolo, great. I think he's an improvement over Andy Dalton. I think he could be this team's quarterback for the next 8 to 10 years, somebody like that. But there aren't enough free agents like that the Saints can afford. I think Derek Carr would be a massive improvement. And I know a lot of fans disagree. I think Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback. But, Duncan, I'm looking through the money and what the Saints would have to do. Is it worth gutting your roster? Because then you go through 2 years of now there's no question you got to go through all this rebuilding. You have to hope that they don't have the injury problems they've had the past 2 seasons. I don't think Derek Carr is a possibility. So it's either Jimmy Garoppolo or get lucky in the draft. And do you want a rookie quarterback starting for you? We saw what happened with Atlanta last year. They probably should have just started Desmond Ridder from the beginning.
Well, to me, what they do at quarterback is going to really be the divining rod or the weather vane for what they're thinking about the roster and the team in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to find out really quickly the moves they make at quarterback, how they feel about the team. Do they feel they're competitive, they can win right now? Then they're going to bring in a veteran guy that can win right away and try and win. If they don't do that and they decide to go in the draft and draft a rookie, then they're saying we're building for the future. We're sticking with Dennis Allen. He's got a long runway with us. There's no more specter of Sean Payton. We're going to ride this out and lean on our stability and culture and all the things they talk about. And there's going to be a little bit of a transition. They could do something like both, right? I could see them doing that, but I can't see them getting in the big name quarterback hunt because I don't see how they can do it financially and draft a rookie at the same time. It can happen, but it's be very difficult with the shape of their salary cap situation and knowing that they still want to sign some of their own free agents. I think they'd like to get Marcus Davenport back. I know they want Caden Ellis back. I know they'd like to get Carl Granderson under contract. Those guys are going to command decent contracts, and it's going to make it even harder, I think, to get a top quarterback considering those limitations.
Wish they could have found a way to get Trey Henderson to stay here.
Yeah,
that would have been a big help. Look,
and they got to hire a defensive coordinator now. They got a lot of big decisions to make.
Well, a defensive coordinator to me is not as huge a deal because it's sort of like the reverse of Sean Payton and Pete Carmichael. Sean Payton was the OC with giving it the title to Pete Carmichael, and I think Pete's a great assistant coach. That's a whole different story. But we know that Dennis Allen, the Saints are better. Put it this way. The Saints are a better football team when Dennis Allen is calling the defensive plays. I think that's clear and unmistakable. One thing that you talked about just now, that another thing that pops up, we talk about what the fans are going to feel, but Are they going to be able to? They're committed to Dennis Allen. I get that. He would have to do awful next year for him not to get a third season. I think you and I both agree. I don't think the fans agree with that, but I think you and I both agree on that. So what happens if next year is worse than this year? They finish 5-12, 6-11, which is, I think, more likely than not. I got to be honest. I mean, we'll see what happens in the draft. We'll see what happens with free agency. But let's say, for argument's sake, they go 6-11 next year, and the fans are just screaming for Dennis Allen's head. You and I both know it's probably not going to change. Then what? Yeah,
look, I mean, that's what Mickey Loomis has got to figure out. I'm sure he's evaluated all those possibilities and considered them all. The Saints, you're talking to them just on the business side of things. I think we've talked about this on the program before. The Saints, the way they're built financially as a small market club, they lean heavily on season ticket sales.
Yes.
For a huge amount of their revenue, more than most teams, because they don't have the corporate base, the Fortune 500 companies. They need, I think the description I've heard before is, we're the Walmart of the NFL. You have to have like low margins, but high turnover, right? High sales, and you have, small profit margin. So they need to always be good because they have to sell tickets. I mean, they can't afford to have, the dome not full. Now, for the most part, they do sell their season tickets ahead of time, so it's not a problem. But as that starts to taper off, that's a big deal for the Saints. They can't really afford that. They have to have the dome sold out before the season every year. They've done that for now, close to 20 years. But there's a lot of people, and I've got friends and colleagues that tell me they're going, either they're canceling their season tickets or they're going from 10 down to 4. They're making hard decisions. It's a tough time with inflation right now. It costs a lot to go to NFL games. And when you go, you want to see a good product, not only a winning product, but you want to see an entertaining product. And that's really, in my opinion, when you're looking at the 60,000-foot view of what Mickey Loomis and management and ownership have to determine, that's what they have to find out is, are people going to continue to go to these games, even if they're winning, but it's 17-13? For so many years, even when the Saints were losing with Sean Payton and Drew Brees, they were fun to watch. They had one of the best offenses in the league, and they threw it all over the dome. Defensive football wins a lot of games, but it's not the most exciting, sexy thing. And I think that's something that they have to take into consideration.
No, and I think that's exactly goes to my point of if Dennis Allen has another 6-11, 7-10 kind of season, I'm not sure that this team, it's not like when Sean Payton was here and they went 7-9 3 years in a row, not just because of the offensive show and Drew Brees and all that. I mean, there was a feeling that this team was going to be back to where they were, even when they went 7-9 3 years in a row. I didn't necessarily think that way. I was proven wrong, and gladly so. But they did get back to where they were before. But it's a different feeling now, and whether they do or don't. If you have another season like this, Saints fans aren't going to feel that way. They don't have the confidence. There is no Sean Payton. There is no Drew Brees. And so to your point, could this be a time when, I know the Saints are going way down their season ticket list now. Remember when they had 15,000 or 20,000 on a waiting list? It's not like that anymore. They're going way down their waiting list, I know. And so there isn't going to be a waiting list anymore if they have another season like they had last year. And especially if they have 2 more and they have to rebuild. It's a tough scene for Mickey. So that's why I don't know that he can afford. And look, we're putting the cart ahead of the horse. They could. The division's certainly easier next year, no matter who Atlanta. I think Atlanta and Carolina both are going to be better. I think Tampa Bay is going to be bad next year. We'll see who they get in free agency. But we know that Frank Reich's going to get him a quarterback. I don't know who that's going to be. Atlanta, I would be surprised if they don't get a quarterback, even with Desmond Ridder there. But the schedule is much easier next year than it was this year. But that being said, you can't afford to go. To me, they got to have a winning season at the minimum.
And look, I think this quarterback decision, the big decision Dennis Allen, Mickey Loomis are going to have to make. I mean, it really is. It's vital, I think, and that's why I really think there might be, JD, some creative options that people just aren't thinking of right now. I know how Mickey Loomis thinks. I mean, he's a sharp guy, and he will explore all avenues. So maybe the obvious, right? Oh, free agency, get a veteran, draft one, a Hendon Hooker. That's the obvious avenues. But what about a trade for, look, I'm just throwing things out. I don't, and there's no intelligence behind this. I'm just throwing out ideas. But, we heard recently where Justin Fields was, possibly on the market. You make a trade for a player like that, or Trey Lance. Maybe the Niners decide, hey, you know what? We're going to go with Brock Purdy. We can deal Trey Lance. I'm not saying these things are going to happen, but there's all kinds of other creative options where maybe the Saints say, well, you want Mike Thomas in return? We have some assets here.
Done.
You see what I'm saying?
Done.
I think there's a little more creative.
Mike Thomas for Trey Lance, done.
Well, and you'd have to throw in more. But the point is, there's other ways to get this done where you get a quarterback on a rookie salary, and it works well with what the Saints are doing. It gives fans some hope. You build around it. I would look into that hard. If I were them, I'd make a call to the Niners and say, what are y'all going to do? Now, they probably want to keep both those guys and figure out who's the best, but, they're not going to be able to have both those guys forever. So I just think there's some options there that we're not thinking of that could be percolating on Airline Drive that might solve this issue and make it financially feasible at the same time. Deal some of these assets on your roster because, I've talked to them about Mike Thomas privately, and I haven't written it yet, but, there's still a sliver of hope. I shouldn't say hope. That's not the right word. There's a sliver of possibility that he's back on the roster next year.
Yeah.
They haven't closed that door, but all likelihood they're going to end up having to release him. But I think they'd love to be able to maybe get something in return instead of just outright cutting him. So maybe you do talk somebody into taking on his contract in a trade for a quarterback. I'm just throwing out all kinds of options here.
Well, I mean, let's be frank too. I mean, if the Saints got a decent free agent quarterback in here, and it did look like they were making moves and they bolstered the offensive line and, some things, Mike Thomas may want to come back. And I mean, I know fans don't want to hear this or believe this, but I think a huge part of it is, does he want to be here? And if he wants to be here, it's a whole different story. Can a 30-year-old wide receiver who hasn't played basically in 3 years, come back and be anything close to what he was? We don't know the answer to that. It's possible. So, I mean, I agree. You can't close the door to Mike Thomas coming back and being effective. And so, I mean, and I also agree with there are going to be, it happens every year. There are weird trades, weird moves where you shake your head and you go, what? How did that happen? I mean, it's every year. It's just like last week going into conference championship week, and the lines were pick'em and -2, but we both knew one of those games was probably going to be a blowout, right? I mean, because that's the way that it happens. I mean, so you can't expect, you don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen. And there are surprises every offseason. There are going to be plenty of surprises. Whether the Saints are involved in any of those surprises, who knows? We have a question. We actually have this question is kind of related to some of the other comments from some other people that I have not shown their comments because I didn't like the way they got started with their comments. So we've just kind of ignored them. But this one kind of goes to a lot of the other ones. So I'm gonna post it here. Dustin McCann says he wants to know, and I'd have the same question. Do you think Pete Carmichael can actually develop a player like Justin Fields?
Yeah. Look, I don't think it's just one guy. I think it's a whole collaborative effort. I mean, Ronald Curry is a really good quarterback coach. Yep. I mean, he's interviewing for offensive coordinator jobs. Yep. I think here's a little possibility for you. I'll just throw this out there. I'm not breaking any news, but don't be surprised if Joe Lombardi's back on this staff. He's been an offensive coordinator. They would have, you know what I mean? They would have some guys that would help develop. But I just, as I'm sitting here imagining what we just talked about, if you all of a sudden got a young quarterback that's already in the league, Trey Lance or Justin Fields, a running quarterback, just start to think about, JD, the way Dennis Allen wants to win games, right? He wants to play defense, lean on that great defense, special teams.
I agree.
You want to be a running team, probably. You want to be a little more like the Ravens.
Yes.
You suddenly start to see at least a vision, right? You get Trey Lance in here, you have Taysom Hill, you draft another running back to go with Kamara, and all of a sudden you got something, right? You're moving away from Mike Thomas. You're going to be more of a Baltimore Ravens style attack. At least you've got a plan on how a formula, and I could see that selling to the fans, and I could see it actually potentially being successful. It's just different, and I think they have to think that way going into this offseason. I think something like that could possibly work.
Yeah, and all my lack of faith, I guess, and where this team is going, I will say this on the positive side. I agree 100%. I think if this team changes the direction of their offense and realize this is what I want Pete Carmichael to do. Because you know what, honestly, I think he's a great non-game day coach, if that makes sense. I think he's a great planner. I think he can help develop someone else. I want Pete Carmichael to say, you know what, I don't necessarily mean throw away this old playbook, but you want to talk about distancing yourself from Sean Payton? Pete Carmichael, get your own playbook. Do your own thing. Change, adapt to your style. Do your thing. I want him to do that. I want Pete Carmichael to be his own man and say, whether he can do it, I don't know. But I think he can, and I think he can help develop a young quarterback. I believe that he comes up with good game plans. The problem is we haven't seen it enough. So that's what I want him to do. I want the team is just, if you're going to move on from Sean Payton, move on from Sean Payton. And the problem was they had too much of Sean Payton's playbook, trying too many things, trying to fit in their own wrinkles here and there. Just forget about the wrinkles. Just use your own damn playbook.
Well, they just need to determine an offensive identity.
I agree.
And beyond what they have with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. I think that's critical to this offseason. And then I think Pete Carmichael's a smart guy. Lombardi, if he comes back on board, I think he's going to have a decision, because I think Sean Payton's going to come after him as well. They're going to have to determine, how they build this offense around, like all good coaches, you build it around the skill sets of the players you have available. I mean, Sean Payton, I don't know if, in the book, writing the Payton and Brees book, the one thing I learned was the Sean Payton offense isn't Drew Brees and that style quarterback. The Sean Payton offense is a lot of stuff, and then they take what's in there and tailor it to the skill sets of the players they have. That's why when he was leaning heavily towards going with Taysom Hill, that was still a Sean Payton offense. It was all in there, and they just took the running stuff with Taysom Hill and built it into what the game plan was. So it's, I think it's flexible enough that they can go with what they have. It's just a huge offensive system that I think is flexible enough to be conducive to whatever style quarterback they get.
I'll say this. If I had to pick one of the two teams that I'd rather be a fan of, at least next year and maybe the year after and going in the immediate future, I'd rather be a fan of the Saints than the Broncos. There is nothing I saw from Russell Wilson that makes that, even Sean Payton, and maybe he'll go back to being a semblance of himself. I don't know, but he had mental issues last year. And I'm not talking about off the field. I'm talking about on the field, where he just was indecisive. When he did make decisions, they were bad. He was nothing like his former self. And I don't know if it was because of coaching. Nathaniel Hackett's supposed to be a quarterback guru. He worked with Aaron Rodgers for that long. Not that Aaron Rodgers needs a lot of help, but I think the Saints are in a better position. You can look at Denver's defense, which is really good, but the Saints defense, I think, is as good or maybe even a tinge better. So depending on who comes in here, now I know Denver also has Javonte Williams coming back, which will be a huge, they really missed him when he got hurt early in the season. They obviously missed him, and Melvin Gordon wasn't the answer. He can't do it by himself. But, I think I'd rather be a fan of the Saints right now, I think.
Well, you got some pieces out there, but Sean Payton's looking at it way beyond, 2023. He's looking, sustained success over the long haul. First things first, get a coaching staff assembled, establish a culture and a mindset, all the things he did when he came here. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just working on this, book with Steve Gleason, and we're actually on the chapter where Steve is talking about his memories of Sean Payton coming in 2006 and establishing the culture right away. And it's really fascinating to get Steve's viewpoint on it. I mean, because he welcomed that. He said there's people in the building that were dying for hard coaching, and how Sean Payton immediately set the tone by, trading Dante Stallworth, who was a first-round draft pick, and then a year later they cut, remember, Antonio Pittman, the fourth-round draft pick, and kept Pierre Thomas as undrafted. He said those things resonated in the locker room. He's going to do those kind of things in Denver and establish, an all-in mentality. And I think you're right about Russell Wilson. I think it's going to be a short leash for him. In other words, he's going to have about a year to prove that he can do it with Sean Payton. And if not, they're going to move on from him. But I do think the guy probably is humbled after last year, and he's probably welcoming Sean Payton to come in to help him resurrect his career. I think the key for him is going to be off the field. Does he want to kind of stop being the Russell Wilson brand and be the leader of a football team? I think that's where Sean Payton will help him.
Yeah, I think Russell Wilson lost a lot of his teammates at some point last year, and that didn't help him either. We saw it. I don't remember what game it was where they lost. They gave up like 40 points, which is not towards the end of the season, not a Denver defense at all, and basically said, to hell with you, offense. You don't want to play. We're not going to play either. And I know Sean Payton will be able to change that mindset and say, look, we're not doing that kind of crap. But he has a ton of work to do there. It's a similar boat, I guess, to the one here.
A lot worse here than Denver now. I mean, when he came in here in 2006, I mean, you're talking about a challenge. I mean, so I think he's definitely capable. He knows what he's getting into with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Justin Herbert, but I don't think he's intimidated. I mean, I've never known Sean
he's never going to be intimidated.
Be worried about a challenge. I think he's looking forward to it.
William Lopez, and this is a good question. I know we have talked about this, William, but for people that have joined the show later or been in and out or whatever, we'll bring it up again because we're about to move on. He says, just joining, a great deal of buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl involving Derek Carr and the Saints. What do you thought of a potential trade? Before Dunk talks about this, and again, we've discussed this, but the possibility of a trade is becoming less and less likely because Derek Carr is not willing to change anything. It sounds like he wants to be a free agent. So, Dunk, I think you would agree that the possibility of Derek Carr being traded at this point is not very likely.
Right. Yeah, I think he's going to end up being cut. I mean, why trade something for him if the Raiders are moving on from him? They're probably going to have to cut him. It's similar to the Mike Thomas thing. Everybody knows in the league that the contract has a $34 million roster bonus in March, and they know the Saints aren't going to pay that. So, why trade for him when you can just wait till they cut him and you can negotiate without that? Yeah,
and William also, we talked about his other potential free agents. Jimmy Garoppolo is a possibility, but Dunk says, and I agree. I mean, you never know what can happen. Strange things happen. Trey Lance could get traded. Justin Fields could get traded. These could be the teams throwing off the scent of people. Like Sean Payton was a master at throwing off the scent, especially when players that he wanted. How much different Sean Payton would still be here? You'd have to think had Andy Reid not jumped ahead of him and got Patrick Mahomes. And we all know that Sean wanted Patrick Mahomes to come. Could you imagine this franchise with Patrick Mahomes here?
Yeah, I mean, he told me he was the highest graded quarterback he's ever had. I mean, of any quarterback he's ever rated.
Why did he go 11th?
The thing that they told me, because he came out of that Texas Tech system, and there was a lot of questions on the spread offense, and not very many of those guys have panned out. I mean, look at the Lincoln Riley tree. Very few of those guys have panned out. So I think there was concern about that. But what he did tell me was that on their board in 2017, they had Patrick Mahomes number 1 overall on the whole board, and they had Marshawn Lattimore number 3 on the whole board. So when they were drafting, and suddenly I think the pick before was Buffalo, when it came to Buffalo being on the clock, he knew they were going to get, no matter what, one of their top 3 players at number 11. And then the Chiefs traded up with Buffalo and took Mahomes right before him. But they still were happy because they were getting such great value at number 11.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Barry has become a regular. We're going to show his comment. We thank you for asking a question here, Barry. During an interview, Sean spoke on how hard it was to come to New Orleans, small market, not exactly a city coaches want to move their families to. His words. Now, it was a lot different in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina had basically demolished the city. So when he came here, it was much harder to come to New Orleans than it is now. He wants to know, will this hinder coaches wanting to join Dennis Allen in New Orleans?
No, because what Payton was referring to is post-Katrina New Orleans,
Right.
which was half, devastated, or more than half, 80% devastated. And, it wasn't an operating, functioning city at that point.
We weren't living here for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Sean's line that he always used over and over was there were a lot more cars going out of town than going in at that time. A lot of people on the road, they were coming in, moving in, and most people were moving out. So, to put together a coaching staff was difficult back then, because if you were a coach that had options, why would you choose to go there coming off 3-13 season in a city that had been flooded with, had school issues and hospital issues? I mean, coaches have to think of their families and things like that. And it wasn't just the NFL. It was anybody thinking about moving to New Orleans. You would consider it, you'd really have to have a reason to come here at that time.
Jeff Duncan was riding around the city in a flatboat and a P-Rod. I mean, at times after Hurricane Katrina, doing news stories. I mean, I'm sure you remember that. It wasn't that long.
My favorite memory of that was taking baths in the backyard pools along Ottoman Park, because there was no working water, and people's abandoned homes, we were taking baths in their pools. They still don't know that we did that.
I was going to say.
And then the other thing was David Meeks, our old boss, procured a portalette from a construction site nearby so we could use the restroom. That's how we used the restroom throughout the reporting process. He commandeered one on the back of one of those Times-Picayune delivery trucks and just brought it to the house we were working out of, so we'd have, the facilities, if you will.
Yeah, well, I lived in Baton Rouge for about 2 months with a bunch of other co-workers. It was a very interesting time. I was Katrina hit, 13 days following the separation of my first wife. That was a fun time. So we all went through a lot of things during Katrina. So for Sean Payton to come here, you always have to respect that he was willing to do that, and Drew Brees for that matter. Now, again, I mean, you could go and look, say, well, Miami didn't want him. This might have been his only real option, but I think it worked out okay for everybody involved. So, and then going to that NFC Championship that first year, that might have meant as much of the city as actually winning the damn thing.
Hey, and let me just derail that real quick, that thought, because I wanted to say something real quick, because I actually I wrote this column the other day about Peyton's legacy. And because it's the last time we're all going to probably deal with Sean Payton as we move forward. And I just felt it was important for people to understand, there's this narrative going around that Sean Payton, at least among some people in the fan base, that he quit on the team and didn't want to come back to New Orleans. And there's all these rumors and speculation, and it's just not true. I mean, I've talked to Payton at length about all this. He was burnt out. Now, people keep bringing up this flirtation with Miami. That has been so overplayed. You know what happened on that? Sean Payton was down in Cabo after last season trying to decide if he was going to come back to New Orleans. And everyone in the league knew it. And a lot of people knew he probably was going to take a year off or 2 years off, whatever. And so Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, called Don Yee because he thought, well, if Sean Payton's not going back to New Orleans, I want to let him know that we're thinking about making this move. And that was the extent of the tampering, was a call to his agent at the time. I've seen now people saying Sean Payton was putting together a staff and all this other stuff. It's so not true. And Sean Payton took a year off. He didn't know at the time of a year ago at this time how long he was going to be off. I mean, you got to remember, 10 years is kind of the going rate for most NFL coaches. I've cited that in my column. Bill Walsh said, don't stay longer than 10 years. We saw what happened with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Saw what happened. Andy Reid, yes, Andy Reid in Philly. Bill Walsh left after 10 years in San Francisco. Joe Gibbs left after 11 in Washington. And they both ended up sitting out longer. They sat out multiple years before they got back into it. Jim Mora burned out here like a flame, and had to quit mid-season in 1996. These guys sometimes burn them, grind themselves to a pulp. So for people to think that it couldn't happen after 16 years, they're trying to, conspire and come up with a conspiracy theory. He needed time off. And so then this narrative developed that he was offered a sabbatical. I asked Payton directly about that. He said, absolutely not. I remember talking to Gail Benson myself, and she told me, she said, look, I told him, take as long as you want. If you have to take 2 weeks in Cabo, if you have to take a month, we'll be here waiting for you. In other words, that's an owner saying, don't make a rush decision. Now, there's a reality to that, and Sean Payton knew it too. You can't just take the whole 6 months of the offseason. Mickey Loomis has to have a head coach. They have to have a direction. They can't just take all that time. And as Payton told me, you can't just take a sabbatical. Who's going to be the interim head coach? How's that going to work? I don't know that 1 year is going to be enough when I'm walking away, just like it wasn't enough for Joe Gibbs. It wasn't enough for Bill Walsh. So people saying this, he emphatically denied it. So, and then back to what I was telling you before, we've talked about this before. He told me personally multiple times he was willing to come back to New Orleans in this past season. Now, he didn't want that to be firing Dennis Allen and bring me back. He said if it fell apart down there and things came to that, he would come back. He would consider it, so much so that he was looking at the roster, and this was what he was doing with every potential opening, not just New Orleans, but he looked at the roster, determined where he would make changes, who he wanted to bring back, the coaching staff, the front office. He wouldn't have done that if everyone here in their conspiracy theories was saying he was done with New Orleans. Why would he even do it? Why would he even take the time? If he was done, he wouldn't have done it. So I'm just wanted to set that record straight. Now, I understand why Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson didn't do it. I understand it. I think they're wrong. I think when you have a chance to get Sean Payton, you go get him. I think he's a Hall of Fame coach. They should have gone and gotten him. I realize it would call for the end of Dennis Allen here, who I like and who I think is a good coach. I get it. But you got a chance to get Sean Payton back. You get him, in my opinion. I understand why they didn't, but I think that record needed to be set straight.
I agree that the record needed to be set straight, and the commenters and other fans watching and whoever else may listen to this podcast or watch this show later who think differently or have their own opinions, I'm going to say this. My opinion, your opinion doesn't mean jack, because Jeff Duncan has talked to the man himself. So unless Sean Payton is just flat out lying, which he has no reason to lie about any of these things, then Jeff Duncan would know before some of you guys in the comment stream that I haven't shown again because of the way you started out. And
here's the other thing. Let me interrupt real quick. Here's the other thing. It's not just Sean Payton. Everybody thinks, oh, Sean Payton, we've heard him fib before. He's gonna. When you get information like that, it's corroborated from other people in the circle. It's corroborated from people on the Saints side. It's numerous people. It's not just one person. And more important than that, I know Sean Payton really well. I've dealt with him for 16 years. We have a very good relationship. I know when he's lying, for the most part. I mean, I know when his agenda's there. You have to understand the context of these conversations. When he brought up coming here, he brought it up unsolicited. It wasn't in the context of me going, would you come back if it happened? And him saying, oh, yeah, I would. That could easily be stretching the truth in that context. This was brought up without me even asking about it. So there's a difference. And you know this, Jim, because we deal with people lying all the time. It's part of journalism. People lie to us. I can smoke out deception in a heartbeat. It's what I do. We seek the truth. So I have a very good BS meter. And I know when Sean Payton's kind of stretching the truth. He wasn't in this case. And it's been corroborated with other sources in the building. So just get it in your head. It could have happened. It would have been difficult for it to happen. Very difficult.
I don't think you can do the job that we do without having a good BS meter. I think it's why a lot of sports writers, and I know plenty of them, who love to play poker, and most of them are pretty good at it, because we're pretty good at sniffing out lies. And if you can't, you're not going to stay in this business for 30 plus years, as Duncan and I both have been. And yes, we're old, in case you were wondering. We're both old, and we've both been in this business for a long time. Okay, we're going to move on from Sean Payton. I wanted to spend a half an hour and ended up turning into longer than that. We're going to get our full thoughts on the Super Bowl dunk next week, and we'll give our predictions next week and those things. But I do want to touch on it. I think that, the Chiefs, to me, and we're going to talk about the Eagles, but the Chiefs have shown that throughout this season had that little air of attitude. And I'm not going to make my final prediction yet. I got to be honest. I don't know my final prediction yet. I know where I'm leaning. And I think it'll be obvious to what I say here. But the Chiefs kind of went into the season, and people were talking about the Bills and the Bengals, and they're up, and they showed it last week with the attitude, and they lost to the Bills and the Bengals in the regular season. But there's something about this Chiefs team, and there's this little thing of attitude going on, and going into the Super Bowl, I can kind of feel it. I don't know if that's going to lead them to a victory or not, but there's something going on, and the Chiefs, more than just wanting to win the Super Bowl, which they obviously do, they got something to prove.
Yeah, I think Philadelphia is probably a better all-around team, but I'm with you. I feel like Kansas City is a little bit on a mission and has maybe the intangible factors going for them. The other thing, and I haven't formulated my final thoughts either, but I'm kind of leaning toward KC. The other thing that hits me is Philly's had maybe the easiest road to get to the
no doubt
history of the NFL. I mean,
ever
a Giants team that's kind of rebuilding at home, who they've already beaten, and then the 49ers game might as well have been a no contest.
Yeah.
So and everything kind of went their way, right? They got the big play at the beginning with Devontae Smith that really should have been overturned. They get the injury to Purdy. I mean, just everything. It's not going to be that easy this time. And I just feel like this team hasn't encountered a lot of adversity.
And they had the easiest regular season schedule in the NFL.
Yeah. So I'm kind of leaning towards KC, but I'm with you. I need to think more about it because I do really believe in what Philly's doing. I mean, I think they're very difficult. They caused some problems for the Niners defense that I was really didn't anticipate. I mean, that running game is serious with that offensive line they've got and Jalen Hurts' threat and the movement that they create. It's serious stuff there. And it's really when I was talking earlier about the Saints and, maybe thinking about doing something like that, getting creative. I could see the Saints seeing what Philly's doing and thinking that would work for us. We got a really good defense. We got a good offensive line. Let's get a quarterback in there that can run that kind of system. And you could make hay with that. So I think that could give the Chiefs some problems, that running game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because I agree wholeheartedly. And that's one of the unknowns. But, you're talking about a team that's is experienced in Kansas City. All those guys have been through this run before. Or not all of them, but most of them have been through this run before. As much as we used to get on Steve Spagnuolo when he was here, he has been known to do a good job in big games. I'm worried about that blitz, though, and I'm not sure that his blitz mentality is going to work as much on Jalen Hurts. And but will Jalen Hurts respond? I mean, he's been in a big game in college, but he got pulled from a national championship game and didn't do very well in his other college football playoff game. So I don't know how Jalen Hurts is going to respond. And then, to me, besides Patrick Mahomes, the number 1A kind of tete-a-tete, I guess, is Andy Reid against Nick Sirianni. I mean, Sirianni's got an ego the size of where I'm doing the show right now. But Andy Reid, couldn't you see him, and I've heard grumblings of this, couldn't you see him saying, let's win this Super Bowl and I'm going to ride off into the sunset? Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people in the industry talk about that. Matter of fact, I had someone in the industry this week reach out to me that said they were hearing that could be a potential spot for Sean Payton if they held out that long. So there's obviously some validity to that, and I could definitely see that potentially happening. So yes, that gives them an intangible factor, and I agree with you. The two most important aspects of a football team are the quarterback and the head coach, and I think KC has a decided edge in both.
And I don't care what anybody says. What Patrick Mahomes has done through the course of this postseason, as brief as it's been, to play on I don't think people understand. We joke about toes and Michael Thomas and Brandon Ingram and all that. I don't think people understand how hard it is to play on a high ankle sprain, no matter what position you play. And to play at the level that he played last Sunday against Cincinnati it's mind-boggling. I mean, he threw for 328 yards, and then the dude, when it comes down to it, makes that run. He gets shoved out of bounds, clearly shoved out of bounds, by the way. There's no conspiracy there. I mean, he was shoved. He was two steps out of bounds. But to even make that play and to get to the first down stick to get his team a chance, I don't care what anyone says. There's no better player in the NFL right now, and one day may never be a better player. I'm not saying he's there yet, but he may end up being the best player that's ever played this game.
Wow. Oh,
he could
man.
be. I'm serious. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I agree, because he's got the mental toughness
he
too.
Does.
That's what's really impressive about him. And I agree. We talked about it last week. You could tell they had that edge about Cincinnati. That was a good bet to make last week, Kansas City. You and I talked about it.
I got something right.
They're at home. We're underdogs early on, and I know the line moved, but I think they're underdogs in this game too. So I kind of lean toward them, but I think it's going to be a great game. I'm more interested in getting your thoughts next week about what you think. Is it going to be high scoring or not? Because I think it could be, but I haven't set my thought process on that yet. I think it's going to be an entertaining game though.
Yeah, next week we're going to spend a lot of time talking about matchups and the coaches and all these different things. Next week's going to be, if you want to hear about the Saints, next week's probably not the show for you unless something happens during the week. I mean, we'll touch on them. If they hire a defensive coordinator, we'll certainly talk about that. But this was the week to talk about the Saints week, and we have. And next week's going to be pretty much a Super Bowl show before Duncan and I both take. Well, you probably won't be taking a ton of time off. You're going to be writing your book, but I'm going to be taking I take Mardi Gras season off, a lot of it off, and I'm going to do that again.
Smart man.
Clear my head. Yeah, I got to. And I ride in Endymion, so I'm always looking forward to that. That is 2 weeks from tomorrow. Hard to believe.
Crazy.
But we'll get into all the matchups and stuff next week. All right, before we close the show out today, prepare yourselves. We got to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. Another brutal. Yeah, we have to. I think we need to at least touch on it. Look, they're trying. I mean, there's a lot of teams that go into a tailspin like this team is going in, and you can't say they're not trying. And it's just you get into these slumps, Dunk, and we see them through professional franchises. You and I are huge baseball fans. It happens to even the best baseball teams. Even the best baseball teams, maybe not going to 10-game losing streaks, but going 5 and 6 game losing streaks throughout the course of the season, and they're able to get themselves out of it. I'm not sure. I think the Pelicans will be good again when Zion comes back. It's obviously give them a big boost, but this stretch of schedule has been brutal. They're going to have to once they break that schneid, I think they'll be fine. It's just finding a way to win that first game and getting that streak over with.
Yeah, look, they got an opportunity because they come back home here, but man, it's a tough home schedule. But I think at this point, Willie Green, David Griffin, that leadership out there, they almost have to recalibrate what their goals and expectations are. Because I think at one time you're looking at potentially, being a top seed in the West, and I don't think that's really realistic anymore.
Oh no.
They just need to get into the postseason.
Getting into the top 4 is realistic, though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you got to get Zion back, got to get him healthy. The problem with that kind of injury, it's very finicky. You can't rush it. And what really concerns me most is knowing Zion's history with, trying to keep weight off. I mean, he's a big man. Just genetically, you've ever seen his dad. I mean, his dad was a defensive tackle in college. So he's a big man by nature, a big frame. That's why Zion's such a freak of nature as an athlete. And I think having a hamstring injury, it's difficult to get in shape, right, when you do that. Yeah. You can't do a lot of cardio. I know they can put him in a pool. They can do some things. But in other words, what I'm saying is even when he gets healthy, I think it's going to take him a little while to get in basketball shape, and they can't really rush that because then they could have a setback. So I'm just trying to temper expectations. They just need to get into the playoffs somehow, get over the hump, like you said, It's probably not going to happen until after the All-Star break, and they just got to somehow tread water and just get a win anywhere they can, because this losing streak's been devastating for them. They're right now in the bubble of making the playoffs, and I don't see any hope in sight with the future schedule.
Well, you look at last night. They're down, and they've found themselves in this situation before. Now, maybe not being doubled up at 62-31, which is what they were at one point last night. And then the first half, they gave up 70 points in the first half to the Mavericks, and then they only allowed 41 points in the second half. So now, granted, Luka Doncic went out, and that changed things for the Pels, but they had already started coming back a little bit. How does this team avoid from getting themselves in deep holes? Because if they could just find a way to stop doing that, I think they'd be okay.
Well, that game last night felt to me,
it was weird.
Again, I'm looking at it from the other side. It felt to me like Dallas let up off the accelerator, and that's always dangerous. I've seen it happen too many times in sports.
Yep.
Where you start thinking, the coaching staff, Jason Kidd, thinking, well, let's start emptying the bench. We're thinking about down the road, and all of a sudden the game flips on you. You're on your heels. The other team's got confidence and momentum, and we saw that happen. I think they let up too quickly in that game and almost paid the price. Credit, as you said, the Pels for not giving up. That's the best thing I've seen out of this team. I mean, they play hard almost every night. Willie Green really has established a great mentality and culture there, and that's something to be encouraged about. But they got to figure this thing out, because they're basically losing with everybody but Zion right now. And I know they're playing good teams, but they're going to be playing good teams in the postseason too. So they've got to get back on track, and I think this home stretch coming up gives them a great opportunity.
I will say also that I thought Brandon Ingram looked more like himself last night. He's still missing that that mid-range jump shot that's almost automatic. The one right next to the free throw line. He's still missing that a little bit, but I think last night was a big step towards him getting back to where he was. And when he gets back to where he needs to be, this team's going to be much better off. Obviously, the Captain Obvious statement in the morning. I thought there was one interesting thing last night, Dunk, and I was kind of joking about it with my son, to see Kyra Lewis come in and play. So first of all, he played very poorly, but when he came in, it was almost like showcasing this guy.
That's what they're doing.
He's going to be part of a trade, I would think.
Yep. That's why he's playing. There's no doubt about it. They're getting ready to make a move. You can sense it. You can hear the rumors coming out of camp. They've got to make a move. They need, clearly at this point, they're not building for the future anymore here. They're trying to, become.
And they have a lot of capital, unlike their brothers, the New Orleans Saints. They have a lot of room to do a lot of things.
And they know their core, right? You got your core. So now you just got to start building around that and bolstering that core. They don't need to find the core assets anymore. They got it. So there's no reason to have those draft picks other than to use it to try and win a championship. I mean, there's a window of opportunity here, and I think they know that, and I expect them to make a deal. There's no doubt that's why Kyra Lewis was playing last night.
And played quite a bit before Willie finally said enough and brought in Jose Alvarado, and that's when things started getting a little bit better. The schedule, look, we've talked about this a lot. I think Christian Clark came on Bayou Bets yesterday and said that the Pels, as brutal as he said, he's never seen as brutal a stretch as the one that the Pels have gone through. I mean, just night after night. You look at the last three on this list. Mavericks were the easiest of the bunch. Nuggets, number one in the West. Bucks, number two, I think, in the East, but really could be number one. And then, they played the Celtics a couple of weeks ago twice. They played the Heat twice. The Nuggets now, they played twice in a couple of weeks. So this has just been an absolute brutal piece of the schedule. It gets a little bit easier, and you look at the homestand coming up. This is 3 of the 4 games, and, the Lakers are playing much better right now. They look like they're trying to make a playoff push. LeBron's edging towards that false facade number 1 point scorer in NBA history. Don't get me started on that. And then they play the Kings, the Kings are a really good basketball team. They're number 3 right now in the West.
I know.
And so that's going to be a huge game. So these next 2 games, to me, Dunk, not only are big as far as the Pels getting some of their confidence back, but they're big as far as making a move now, getting back to where they want to be in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think they got to try and win at least 2 of them, right? I mean, they got to get back in the mix here and get a little confidence back.
Yeah,
you can just see the confidence is sapped from this team right now. And I agree with you, though. I mean, look, it's a long season. There's still a lot of games after the All-Star break. They've got to get Zion healthy, and then they've got to kind of get back into a rotation. I mean, Christian had a stat the other day that just blew my mind, that Zion and Brandon Ingram have played 12 games together since Willie Green took over.
That's insane.
That's unbelievable. So
it really is.
That kind of paints the picture of what's happened here over the last year and a half.
Even LeBron and AD have played that more games together than that. I mean, that's kind of insane. But it goes to show, though, the major difference between football and basketball and baseball. In basketball and baseball, you can endure a semi-long losing streak. I mean, you think about 10 games, that's 1/8 of your season. In baseball, 1/16 of your season. I mean, in football, the Saints went through that slump and got to 4-8 and played way better the last part of the season. But it was kind of too late. They beat Tampa. That's a whole different story, and they're back in it. But you don't usually get that opportunity. So you can't have 3 and 4 game losing streaks in the NFL, but you can endure 8, 10 game losing streaks in basketball and baseball. And I think the Pels, they showed last year, Dunk, I'll make this the final comment, but they showed last year that Willie Green got this team ready the last 2 months of the season, and nobody wanted to play the Pelicans the last 2 months of the season last year. I think it's going to be a similar thing this year.
Yeah, I could not agree more. But I think this Lakers game is big because, the Lakers are looking at this like, hey, this is a 2-game flip, right?
That's right.
And so they're going to come in here with some confidence. That's going to be a big game for the Pels. I think that's going to be a great crowd.
I agree.
I think the arena will be rocking. Everybody knows the history with the Lakers. So that's a big game. If they lose that game, I think that could hurt their psychologically in a lot of ways. So we'll see how they come out. They're going to give it everything they got.
I know that they just played. I know that it's the Pacers, and the Pacers aren't a great basketball team, but the attitude that the Lakers showed last night showed me that they're back and trying hard. I know they go through their little spurts where they, AD's hurt again and LeBron's going to sit out this game and whatever, but you can expect the Lakers to come into the Smoothie King Center and give it all tomorrow, I think at 5:00 on Saturday. All right, Dunk, next week we are going to have the big where you're going to buy my king cake reveal. We're going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, matter of fact, I'm going out to get a king cake right now. So
where are you going this week?
I'm going down to Bywater Bakery. I never made it down there.
I thought you went last week.
No. Well, I went down there, but they didn't have the Chantilly one, so I didn't buy one because I'm specifically going to get the Chantilly king cake.
Is Chantilly cake? Can you really have a king cake that's Chantilly? I mean,
I'm going to find out.
Isn't Chantilly cake like this wet cake?
Yeah.
Thing with just like whipped cream
and
type.
Delicious, I might add.
I'm not saying it's not going to be delicious, but I'm not sure that's king cake. We're gonna have a show next. We're gonna have like a special Wednesday show, and it's gonna be just about king cakes, and no one will watch. But we're gonna have a debate on what is a king cake and what is not.
Look, you talk about it being like moist and everything. The last thing I want in a king cake is a dry king cake. I hate.
I'm not saying it's got to be
cardboard like bread. Oh, give me a break.
I'm not asking for that. I mean, you can, but I'm not talking. There's a difference between. Can we have in the middle between dry and wet? And nothing against Bywater.
Filling, man. I'm a filling guy. Give me the cream cheese and all that.
I am too, and my wife hates the filling, so we never get filling king cakes. But I could tell you this: the king cake that you are going to buy me is going to be a filling king cake because it's my king cake. And if she doesn't want to eat any of it, she doesn't have to. I'll eat the whole damn thing by myself.
I like it.
It is what it is. And
all right, we'll do that next week. We'll figure that out.
All right, I can't wait. All right, we thank you for joining us again on Dattitude. It's been a fun show. Again, next Friday will be the last live show for a little bit for Duncan and I as we talk about Super Bowl 57. We'll make our final predictions, and who knows, maybe we'll throw a Saints or Pelicans talk in there as well. Who knows? Have a great weekend, everybody. We will see you next Friday on Dattitude.